welcome to this In Conversation. Should RE be in any new national curriculum in England? We are sharing this recording as an audio file, as due to a technical difficulty when we ran this event live, we are not able to show you any images. You'll notice at about 41 minutes we just lose a couple of seconds of Paul Smalley. But you should be able to understand the gist of what he's saying. We would love to hear your thoughts. Should RE be in any new national curriculum in England? We hope you enjoy this audio recording from Culham St Gabriel's.
My name is Fiona Moss and I work for Culham St Gabriel's as the Education and Programmes Manager. And I'm really pleased to welcome you to this evening's meeting, this evening's In Conversation about should RE be in any new national curriculum. If you could pop yourself on mute, if you've got, all of you, but especially if you've got exciting things going on in your background, that would be really good. And don't worry if there's a good reason you've not got your camera on, we quite understand that. So, welcome, as I say, and I hope you've seen some of the things we've been putting out this week already. I hope you've been seeing the blogs that we've had so far. We've had one by Charles Clarke, former Secretary of State for Education, and he talks about the three possible outcomes there might be and a choice that he says has to be made. Kathryn's going to, in a moment, pop the URLs for those.
Oh, don't worry.
Into our chat so you can see them. And then we've also, and I see him in the meeting, we've also had a blog from Professor Trevor Cooling, who's looking at whether RE should be included in the national curriculum, the standard but not the stuff. So plenty out there already. We've got two more blogs to come. One from Charlotte Newman, who is a secondary teacher and leads RE across a multi-academy trust, and also from Richard Quay, who you will know until very recently was HMI for RE. We've also got our spotlights, our research and our resource spotlight on RE Online have been sort of featured around this area, focusing on the non-statutory national content standard that has been written by REC, and also focusing, the other one, the research spotlight, focusing on the Ofsted subject report from 9 months ago. Well, as I say, welcome. I will welcome our speakers in a moment, but let's start off by gathering some opinions from you. What do you think at this point? Do you think the RE should be in any new national curriculum in England? You can only say yes, no, or don't know. So I'm going to launch that poll now, so you should see a poll coming up on your screen, and excellent, some voting being done. I'll give you a moment or two.
What do you think?
Almost everybody has voted. Excellent. So I'm going to end that poll. Saying that new people can into the room and immediately but I'm going to store that to a close now, and so you should now be able to see the results. So at the moment, 45 of you, 75%, suggest yes, followed by 18% of you saying you're not sure, you don't know, and then we've got 7% saying that we definitely should not. So thank you very much for that. Well, we've had some opinions from you. Let's have something from our speakers. We've got 4 speakers today. So we have Paul Smalley. If you don't know Paul, he leads secondary ITE at Edge Hill. He was the NASACRE chair. He's still on the NASACRE exec. He's also on the REC board, and he's also a trustee of a MAT as well. We have Katie Freeman. Katie is the chair of NATRE. She's a primary teacher. As well as that, she's an RE subject lead in her school in Plymouth. She's also vice chair of NASACRE and on the C of E working party for RE. I do wonder when I read these things out how they've got time to be here this afternoon, but excellent, they are. Then we've got Ben Wood. Ben is a secondary RE teacher and head of department in a comprehensive school in Lancashire. He's the previous NATRE chair to Katie, and he's particularly interested in curriculum development, a good reason for asking him along today. And then finally we have Kathryn Wright, who is the CEO of Culham St Gabriel's. Previously she was an RE advisor. She is on the REC board, and well, so much more I could say about her. So, we're going to go over to our speakers, our 4 speakers. I'm going to take them in turn, and I've got 2 questions I'm going to ask them today. Please do use the chat if you find that to be useful. I'll try and keep an eye on the chat. We're going to have 2 questions that I'm going to ask them. They'll each have the opportunity to answer that. And they'll have an opportunity to comment on what one another has said. But I will also try and take some questions from the chat towards the end of this afternoon's session. Although, knowing how these sessions go, at a rough guess, you'll be having your own conversations on the side in the chat. We've kind of got used to that, haven't we? So I'm going to start off with our first question, and I'm going to ask all of our 4 speakers, what are you hopeful about from RE for the from the curriculum and assessment review? What is it that you are really wanting to see? And I'm going to start off by asking Ben Wood to chat to us. So Ben, what are you hopeful about for RE from the curriculum and assessment review?
Thanks, Fiona. Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to my classroom. So, 3 things I'm going to quickly run through that I'm looking for. So my answer to that poll we did a moment was yes. I think the subject should be part of the national curriculum. I'm more excited about the national bit of that than the curriculum bit of that in a sense. The curriculum issue, perhaps I do have some questions about how specific that might be. But my principal reason here is that the subject needs to be on a similar standing to other subjects in the curriculum. And I think being part of the national curriculum is the best way of doing that. There are obviously a whole range of potential difficulties and concerns with being a national curriculum subject. But I think the opportunity to be on a similar status, the relevance that would bring to us, the funding and support that would bring to us from the national government, a government that successively have not really prioritised the subject in any way, although they sort of say they are, but they're not. Being part of the national curriculum, I think, in that sense, although it has downsides, is something worth doing. My second thing I'd be looking for is an evolved GCSE, particularly, but also GCSE and A-level specifications. The GCSE, as I say, in particularly more into a sort of multidisciplinary approach. I'm a viewer that the current GCSE is better than the previous GCSE. It is more rigorous, it's more demanding, but some of the focuses of that GCSE I don't think are particularly helpful at the moment. We need to have a slightly broader focus. And so an example of that might be the current GCSE, essentially, being able to state ethical responses to certain issues is what's required. I'd be more interested in exploring how different people make ethical decisions rather than what those ethical decisions are to a whole range of issues. The third thing I'd be looking for, third thing I'd like to see from this review, I think the subject should have less of a focus on personal development than it perhaps does at the moment. Certainly the subject should allow for and provide opportunities for personal development, but I don't think it needs to be an expectation or a requirement of the subject that students are expected to develop in some way, whether that's in respect to their own beliefs or their ethics or their values. I think that there are some problems with having that. So I'd like to see a reduced focus in that area, and perhaps in that sense a slightly more academic focus in the subject. Thank you.
Thank you, Ben. A view there from a secondary classroom in Lancashire. So let's go to a primary classroom. Katie, I think you are out there somewhere. Katie Freeman?
Yep, I am here.
Excellent. Oh, it really is a primary class. Actually, it's the primary office.
No, it's not. It's a primary office. Yeah.
Same question.
Very glamorous.
What are you hopeful for RE from the Curriculum and Assessment Review?
So I think the big thing that I am hopeful for is from the Curriculum Assessment Review is that it will confirm the importance of high quality RE for all pupils in all schools. I think there's a lot of times in primary particularly where RE can be that subject that teachers feel underconfident with, and it can fall off the end of a week in some classes and in some schools. I'm kind of a bit tired of being the Cinderella subject that's forgotten about, or when subjects are talked about, like Ben was saying, that we need to be the same as other subjects. We don't want to be, in the national curriculum they're talking about and then we're not included. So I'm a bit tired of us falling off the end. So I would really like to see RE being part of the national curriculum. But if it's too early for that, and if that's not a decision that's made, I really want to see a carefully considered national standard, whether that's the national curriculum or the national content standard being used by all schools, so that we don't have this postcode lottery about where you live and what kind of RE you get. But I really want that standard carefully discussed with RE experts, being part of those decisions and the wording that's put down on the paper. I think Kathryn is probably I'm going to steal a little bit from Kathryn. I'm sure she will talk about freedom of religion and belief. But I've been part of a working group with her looking at this and how that might be a lens in schools for looking at RE. And I'd really like to see that come into the RE classroom, potentially as part of a multidisciplinary approach, and things so that children are getting that understanding of human rights and what freedom of religion or belief is.
Thank you, Katie. So we've heard from a secondary classroom, we've heard from a primary classroom. Now we're going to hear from some people who are not in the classroom anymore. We're first of all going to go to Kathryn.
Thanks, Fiona. You haven't stolen my thunder completely, Katie, but I will come back to that bit in a minute. Hello, everyone. Great to see everybody here this afternoon. So, yes, like Ben, I was one that in the poll said yes to RE going in the national curriculum. So that's one of my hopes from the Curriculum and Assessment Review, primarily because I think it will bring equity and justice for all pupils. I'll say more about this later. But in summary, for me, this is a social justice and an epistemic justice question, and it's not just about wanting the subject in the national curriculum. That's the first thing. The second thing is, again, similar to what Ben said about GCSE or equivalent, because we don't know whether they'll call it GCSE. I'd like to see a GCSE which takes into account a religion and worldviews approach, the real religion belief landscape, disciplinary knowledge, again reflecting what Ben said, and different ways of assessing substantive knowledge as well. I think the current GCSE is too narrow and doesn't build on Key Stage 3. There are dangers, I think, in the current GCSE around essentialisation, and I don't think it reflects the lived reality of believers' practice. So my hope is for significant change in this particular area. And then lastly, picking up on what Katie was saying, I'd like there to be more recognition of RE's contribution to freedom of religion or belief, and also to positive interfaith and belief relations. particularly in preparedness for work. So businesses hope employees come with religion and belief literacy. This was evident in an all-party parliamentary group in Religion in the Media in a report they published in 2021, but we know that's not a reality. We also know from a Culham St Gabriel's commissioned national representative survey, also in 2021, that 71% of respondents felt RE should foster mutual understanding. So RE provides a space to build resilience in combating anti-Semitism and combating Islamophobia, as well as promoting and protecting freedom of religion and belief. So my hope is that this is publicly recognised in any new curriculum, where space is given for pupils to focus on these issues, particularly through dialogue and encounter. In addition, I think a disciplinary approach, which Ben also referred to, using different methodologies, supporting critical thinking, which helps people navigate our increasingly complex world, which somebody has referred to in the chat, through critical thinking and so on, will hopefully develop activists, mediators and campaigners of freedom of religion or belief and interfaith and belief positive community relations in the future. So those are my three hopes.
Thank you very much, Kathryn. Someone's already asked for a link for the data you've just referenced.
Okay, I will try and find that.
Let me know that. So our final speaker, Paul, I'll just remind you all of the question they're answering in case you've forgotten. What are you hopeful about for RE from the Curriculum and Assessment Review? So Paul, let's go to higher education.
Hi, yeah. Well, I mean, the advantage of going forth is everyone's said everything already. So there's loads and loads that I agree with Ben and Katie and Kathryn. I'm really hopeful that the Curriculum and Assessment Review really does a good job of strengthening the position of RE, of reminding people of the need for all schools to provide RE to pupils in all years, in all areas of the country, in all sorts of schools. I'm hopeful that it'll in some way reiterate the importance of pupils studying the ways that religions and secular worldviews and philosophical life stances use things like stories and symbols and praxis and all of that to help them, and this is perhaps where I differ maybe from a little bit of what Ben said, to help them to make sense of the world. And what I mean by that is a historical understanding of what's been going on and a contemporary understanding as well. But I don't think, perhaps this is where I do agree with Ben, I don't think it's a special thing that RE does. I think if education isn't making a difference to what pupils think and understand and believe, then it's probably not an education at all. And whether that's RE or English or design technology or whatever else it is, I think that's important. So personal development is important, but I don't think it's specifically important for RE. Along with Ben, I do hope that the GCSE and the A-level specifications are modified and changed and strengthened. Ben is actually much more expert on these things than me because he teaches it all the time. But my concern is that, I think Kathryn alluded to this as well, that the GCSE should be a summative assessment of what pupils know about religion and worldviews after 10 or 12 years of study. And it doesn't feel like that. And that's a difficult nut to crack. I've met with, I see Esther's here, I've met with people on exam boards, and that's a difficult thing to do. But I hope the Curriculum Assessment Review points some way towards doing that. Interestingly, I ticked on the poll, I don't know, just because I thought everyone else would say yes, I want a national curriculum. But more of that later.
Thank you, Paul. So thank you for all of our speakers. It's interesting to see the chat going on to my left over here. There's some interesting debate on some of the things that they've all said. So we've already started a debate on whether there's a difference between personal development and personal knowledge. We're not going to deal with that in this webinar, but if you haven't come across the REC webinar that was around that subject, I would recommend you can listen to the recording of that. I'm not sure we're going to crack that nut this evening, but also some interesting questions. There was a lot of chat, wasn't there, around GCSE, and I can see conversation around the EBAC and whether we should be having GCSEs anyway, a broader general educational comments in there as well. I noted a few connections in things that you were all saying. I think what was important for all of you was for all pupils to be provided with good quality RE, broad-based, critical, a reflective religion and worldview education for all ages. There was definitely also a theme of reform needed within our examination structure, particularly GCSE was mentioned, but also I don't know whether Ben would disagree with this or not, but a preparedness for the world. So as Paul put it really well, I think. Actually, we hope all of our education is going to ensure change in children. We don't want them to be exactly the same when they come in to when they leave. And RE has its place to play in that. So there's something about preparing people for the world. But also there was stuff about it being a good standard, and also freedom of religion or belief. So lots of connections there. I'm going to mix things up a bit. So warning to Katie, you're going to be the first one to answer this next question. Katie missed the before chat when I told her that, so I thought I ought to give her at least 10 seconds warning. So all of our speakers are now going to answer the question, do you think RE should be in the national curriculum? Why or why not? Well, we've already heard several of them tell us how they voted in the poll. Now we're going to hear from all of them, I assume, about how they voted. And a reminder that there will be an opportunity after they've asked questions of one another for you to ask some questions. I shall pick them out and I may well voice them for you, but I will be looking out for those. So, Katie, over to you. Should RE be in the national curriculum? Notice a new national curriculum. And yes, I know we're only talking about England here. Why or why not?
So if I had £1 for every time someone asked me this in the last month, I think I would be very rich. But yes, I do think that RE should be part of the national curriculum. I think that I've done a lot of thinking about this, to try and get my head around what I think, the subject needs and what's sensible. I think my reservations that I have about it are that I worry that what would happen if that legislation was rushed through or not properly considered by people who know and understand our subject, because we know how unique it is. I am in favour, though, of a national curriculum because I think it would be something that schools could be held accountable to. We know that when we're looking at when the subject's taught, whether the statutory requirements are kept to, it's really difficult to do that. So I think it would help as a national benchmark, and it would mean that we could be sure that all children, no matter where they live, receive high quality RE rather than being part of this kind of lottery depending on which school they go to and what that school's offer is. I also hope that it would mean that we could ensure that guidance for schools and teachers was clearer, because of having a national expectation, and that we would be, like as Ben said, on other subjects and on an even keel with them. I do want to reinforce that I really think we need to be sure that the national curriculum content or the structure of that was written alongside a subject expert group, so that we don't have a watered down version of RE.
Thank you, Katie. And I think quite a few people like Katie have spent quite a long time thinking about this, and I know it's been interesting to listen to people who've changed their opinion. If you'd have asked me a year ago, I had a different opinion to the one I have now. I have changed my opinion for various reasons. So, Katie, thank you for telling us what you think there. We're going to go to Paul next.
Hello. And I think if we lived in an ideal world, I probably would say, yes, let's put RE in a national curriculum. But I've just put in the chat a link to an article I wrote recently. And that starts by pointing out that no one designed local RE on purpose. There was never any educational philosophy going behind, you know what, let's treat this subject differently and let's do it. There's a whole history that goes behind why RE is delivered locally, and much of it is, to be frank, quite accidental. I know that there are a lot of people who are hesitant about handing over control of the content of our subject to whoever. And I recall history colleagues being horrified when Michael Gove decided what history was and what it wasn't. No one wants to do that. And one of the advantages of the system that we have now is that teachers actually have a statutory role in determining what goes on in RE. Of course, one of the problems is that many of the advocates and the loud voices who speak in favour of the current situation speak from a position of strength. They might well be in an authority that is well provided for, that has got a host of money and advice and people behind it, and a really good local curriculum. Yeah, if that happened everywhere, we might be having different discussions. But there are, as NATRE's data shows, there are countless schools where it just doesn't happen. Countless schools where it happens very poorly. Countless and NASACRE data, and I suppose, and I really must make clear the fact that although Fiona mentioned lots of organisations I'm associated with, I'm speaking here just as a person. I'm not representing the beliefs of REC or NASACRE or anyone else. But, you know, where there are weaknesses, there are real weaknesses and things that happen. There are brilliant schools. You know, Ben and Katie's schools, they're fantastic. But some places aren't like that. So, yeah, I've been able to, as many of us have, given evidence to the curriculum review. Much of my evidence was around how we need some real strong accountability. We need real strong standards, and we need to encourage schools to go above and beyond and do better than a minimum. Yeah, I think I'll stop there.
Thank you, Paul. And yes, I should make that point for all our speakers. They're all speaking as themselves. Nobody is representing any of the organisations I said they belonged to. They are speaking from their own personal point of view. So we've heard from Katie, we've heard from Paul, a voice from the primary classroom, a voice from higher education. Let's take ourselves to a secondary classroom in Lancashire. So we're going to hear from Ben again. Do you think RE should be in the national curriculum? Why not? And before Ben speaks, when I was deciding who we would ask, Ben was the first name I put down because he has been one of the clearest thinkers that I have heard speak on this for years and years and years. Even when I disagreed with him, he was a very well thought out and clear speaker, which was a bit annoying when I thought something different to him. Ben.
Thanks, Fiona. The same has worked the other way around as well, Fiona, on numerous occasions. Okay. So, national curriculum. My view on that I'd like RE to be part of the national curriculum. RE being part of the national curriculum will unlikely not benefit RE in my school, and it could even potentially reduce the quality of RE in my school. There is that potential there. But it's not my school that's the problem here. As Paul was mentioning, it's not Katie's school that's the problem here. We have enormous numbers of schools where the subject is either not taught it's taught in a very cursory way or it's taught very badly. And I think a national curriculum can help change that situation. So if we sort of talked about, what's the average standard of RE across the country, I think we can raise the average standard of RE across the country by having the subject as a national curriculum subject. At the moment, when it comes to timetabling, lots of places RE loses out. When it comes to resourcing, RE loses out against other subjects. When it comes to professional development, RE loses out. When it comes to recruitment, RE loses out. When it comes to improving standards, RE loses out. RE is the subject that always loses out. Now, there are other subjects that would say similar things. I'm sure if we spoke to people, say from design technology, they would say similar kind of things, and that's in the national curriculum. So the national curriculum is not the panacea. It doesn't solve all of the problems at all, and it brings with it some difficulties, certainly. But being outside of the national curriculum, and this might be a once in a generation opportunity, being outside of the national curriculum absolutely means we never solve those problems, because we've been trying to solve those problems for as long as I've been teaching and longer, and they're still here and they're getting worse. So I think being in the national curriculum, and like I say, this might be the only chance we ever get to become in that status as everything else. So my view would be, let's take the rough with the smooth in that. We can sort some of the other issues out after we're a part of the national curriculum. And so we might have to take some problems, and there might be some difficulties that come with it, but we then proceed in improving the subject the other way. The final point I'd perhaps make on this, I did start by saying it might impact the quality of RE in my school, but actually it doesn't, because good teachers can take a national curriculum and do good with it. There are lots of history teachers around the country very frustrated with what the national curriculum says, and yet there's lots of brilliant history being taught around the country. It's not perfect, of course it's not, but you can take that and you can work with it, okay? Particularly if we're in a scale where a national curriculum is a slightly more slimmed down version than what it used to be, say, 10 years ago, then absolutely you can take that, you can be creative with that, you can make excellent curricula in your schools, but I think overall, being in the national curriculum would mean that the national picture is not so dire, and it gives us the opportunity to make progress, and we really haven't made much progress in 25 years that I've been teaching.
Thank you, Ben. Before we go to our final speaker, just to remind you, I'm going to give them the opportunity to question one another, but then I'm going to take some questions from you to make my life a little bit easier. If you've got a question you would like to ask the panel, please, when you pop it into the chat, can you write the word question at the front of it? I might allow a Q rather than question, and then I'm going to be able to spot it if you pop it in. But I just thought before we get our final speaker to offer her opinion, you may have a question bubbling under. Thank you, Ben. Kathryn, the final word in this little round from you. Should RE be in a new national curriculum?
Okay, well, I think everyone knows that I think it should be on any new national curriculum. But I want to stress as well, a bit like you, Fiona, that I have changed my mind on this in probably the last 6 months, actually, through careful thought and consideration around this. And I'm really aware of the challenges, particularly some of the things that Paul's highlighted and also that Trevor's highlighted in his blog that went on our website today. I've just put in the chat a link to a blog that I wrote in November, which gives a more extended version of what I'm going to say now in the next 3 or 4 minutes. So I think the question for me is that there are four equity issues which I think need addressing. And for me, if RE does not go in a national curriculum, I believe that we will inadvertently increase the injustice that is already in our systems and structures. And I dare say it might even become worse than it is now. So the 4 issues I want to quickly touch on. The first one is about position. And I think, I forget who's mentioned this already, it might have been Katie, it might have been Ben. The subject has got a really vulnerable place in the basic curriculum. It's not valued. The introduction of the EBAC has impacted negatively on the subject. Sitting outside a new national curriculum, which would apply to all schools if the current bill goes through, including academies, would place the subject in an even more inequitable position. What will happen if it isn't in a new national curriculum is the question that I think we should be asking. I think it will be even more sidelined and forgotten. Ofsted's report last year had no main findings that said the curriculum was working well for RE. None. There were no main findings that were positive about the subject. So the current position of the subject is therefore, in my view, completely failing. It cannot stay as it is. The second equitable issue is around provision. So the amount of time given to RE is inconsistent. That's evidenced through NATRE survey. So thank you, Katie and the NATRE team for those. SciAM's reports of Church of England and Methodist schools, as well as Ofsted. In some cases, RE is not taught in year groups. There's an evidenced correlation between studying GCSE religious studies and a better overall progress 8-point score. Yet some children don't get the chance to be able to study. Also, the requirements of different agreed syllabi vary so much, with some requiring everyone to study a GCSE and others not. So there is huge inequity in terms of provision of the subject. Thirdly, I think there's inequity in terms of standards. This has already been touched on already. There's no national benchmark for the subject, leading to inequity and inconsistency in terms of expectations. There are over 100 different agreed syllabi, plus syllabi developed by multi-academy trusts and providers of schools with a religious character. So I think this makes it extremely difficult to hold schools to account. It raises questions about effective progression and assessment where there is so much variation. And then lastly, I think there's inequity in terms of inconsistent content across all types of school. This leads to poor sequencing, weak progression, diversity of pupils' experience, pupils who move from one school to another or in and out of alternative provision, for example, or who are in a transient community or whose parents are in the armed forces, I think are particularly disadvantaged. Numerous reports, Ofsted, Bloom Review, and even 10 years ago, the Commission on Religion and Belief in Public Life, cite the need for a review of how content is specified for the subject. So what we are suggesting here isn't anything new. In fact, we've been talking about it for 10 years or more. So because of that, I think the only solution, and it's still a partial solution, is for the subject to go into the national curriculum. I don't think it answers all the questions, but I do think it would take us somewhere closer to equity than we currently are now.
Thank you, Kathryn. So I don't know if you've heard some of the same kind of connections between what our speakers have been saying. But I think it worked quite well to have you last, Kathryn, because in a way you summed some of that up, because a lot of what people were saying before was around the concept of equity, even though they didn't necessarily use that word. It was, I was really interested in what Ben was saying around, it might not make a difference in my school or Katie's school, but actually this is about the schools where it is not going as well as it is in Ben or Katie's school. It's about standards and accountability, which, as we know, are not what they should be. It's about raising, as I think it was Ben said, raising the average standard. And it is that once in a generation opportunity. Okay, so let's have questions, first of all, from our panel to our panel, questions or comments. Who would like to go first? Or shall I pick on one of you?
I'm going to say I'm happy to go, but I had a comment, or it's kind of comment stroke question for Paul, if that's all right. It was in relation to Paul's kind of Michael Gove comment about history, and it just struck me, Paul, that yes, a government could determine a curriculum that people might not like the look of. My hope is that there will be safeguards in place, that we'll have a subject expert group or equivalent like they do in other subjects to determine curriculum and so on. That's a question, okay, and we don't have an answer to that. However, some in some local SACREs, for example, there may be content, or there may be a lack of content in some cases, because of who's on the SACRE. So, for example, in our submission, we cited an example which I think probably should remain confidential in this space, but we cited an example where a particular religious community group were not allowed to be on the curriculum in their local authority. So decisions like what is going on and what isn't going on are being made at local level, where people may disagree as well. So it isn't that might just happen at national level. Potentially it can also happen at local level as well. The other thing, which I think Ben picked up on as well, connected to that, is that actually a national curriculum, if you look at, for example, something like citizenship at Key Stage 3, for example, it's very high level. It's not really specific. So that creativity, that teacher agency can actually happen at the really local level, i.e. in the classroom with the teacher themselves. So I just want to sort of push back a little bit that actually I agree with you. We may not want to have a curriculum that's maybe determined by government, but there are issues at the local level too in terms of what's being determined.
Thank you, Kathryn. Paul, I better go to you next then.
Yeah, I guess what I would say about that is that at the local level there is the ability, and it's built in, to disagree. You know, if the agreed syllabus conference comes up with a menu of content that someone on the SACRE doesn't like, and teachers have a statutory voice in that, and religions have a statutory voice in that, then there is the ability to disagree. I'm not sure that we would ever get to a situation outside schools about. We tend not to get protests outside schools about poor quality mathematics. We do get it about relationships and sex education and RE. And I think it's important that the religious voice and the religious input is there not as a determinant of the curriculum, but as a way of ensuring that it's a reasonable portrayal of the representation of those religions that is in the content. That doesn't mean a national curriculum can't do that. Actually, it might be better if there's a religious advisory panel that looks at and asserts or advises whoever it is that's writing a curriculum. That might be one way of acknowledging the fuzziness and the variety that is in religious traditions. I suspect, I don't know the case you're talking about, Kathryn, I suspect that it's somewhere where let me take another example. Somewhere where there is a very small minority that has a very loud voice in a very small place can dominate the representation of the larger tradition that they're a part of. That might not be the best way of learning about that larger tradition. If we go to the national scale, potentially there can be much more input from a variety of voices. But we don't know that. We don't know what the future might hold. The national panel, if we have such a thing, might only hear from 2 or 3 or 4 voices, and we might get the smaller dharmic religions potentially complaining yet again that their voice isn't being heard. But I think everything that both of us have said could apply locally or nationally. It's not a reason for doing either or the other.
Yeah. Thank you, Paul. Ben, Katie, a question or comment from either of you?
I'm going to put Ben on the spot, actually, if that's all right, Ben. I just wondered I heard everything you were saying about how it would benefit secondary education if we were part of the national curriculum. But I wonder what you think the biggest challenge for secondary schools would be if RE was to become part of the national curriculum.
I think there'll be multiple challenges. One is there's an immediate practical problem of staffing it in schools. We don't have, and that problem applies at primary to an extent as well. But really, we don't have nationally the staff to teach RE in every school. It just doesn't exist, does it? And so, yeah, some thought would have to be given to how we might move from the situation we're in if it was a national curriculum subject. That there's a time lag before it can be done. If it just gets foisted upon anybody, then we've got many of the same problems. But again, that might mean we're having to tolerate poor quality RE in some places for another 5 years. But in the long run, I think that makes the situation better. But it is going to take time. We're in a difficult situation in staffing, not just RE, but other subjects as well. But the other argument, and picking up on some of what Kathryn was saying, that a subject in which there was clearer direction on what is to be taught enables more resourcing of that, more professional development towards that particular type of teaching. And so people could perhaps be better supported. It's very difficult, just an economies of scale issue with resource providers at the moment, isn't it? Who's going to publish an RE textbook for Key Stage 3? Because who's going to buy it? Because RE at Key Stage 3 or at Key Stage 1, 2 is so different in so many places. It just doesn't make any sense for a publisher to put forward that kind of textbook. So it's the staffing, but I think that can be solved in the long term. One point just to pick up from Kathryn's question and Paul's response as well on, yeah, I mean, I'd be pretty annoyed if a Secretary of State at some point in the future came along and said we've got to do an RE in a way that I don't like doing RE. That's going to annoy me a lot. But part of my response with that's the nature of a democratic system that we operate in. That this current curriculum assessment review is taking place because the Labour government has a democratic mandate to bring it about. And if we want to have him, then we've got to be persuasive and we've got to be clear and we've got to, that's how democracies work. And if we don't like what's happening, then we've got to try and do something about it. But I might not always like what happens, but I think in the same way that, in a sense, currently it's a sort of local system of democratic oversight. If it was a national one, I think there are benefits to that. Yeah, I don't want to teach. I don't want to teach 100% Christianity. That could happen, couldn't it? The Secretary of State could come in and say, right, you're only teaching Christianity. I don't want to teach that. But a Secretary of State can only do that if they've got a democratic mandate to bring that in. And in that sense, I've got to either work with that or I've got to try and change it through a democratic means.
Thank you, Ben. Thank you, all of you. So over to the questions in the chat. You have not let me down, except that we're not on this chat till 6:30. So we're not going to be asking all of them. Apologies to all of you who are going to be disappointed. I'm going to start off with Azan's question. He asked, to what extent does the panel, so you can decide which one of you is answering this, does the panel think local communities should have a say in the content of RE? And while you're thinking about who's answering that, there are several people who have actually commented on this in the chat. Paul, you had your hand up. Very good.
Yeah, so in the article that I put in the chat earlier, it talks about this, and it talks about the need for locality, but we've misdefined locality. The idea that Ben's in a school in Lancashire and it's local is a complete misnomer. Lancashire is huge. The idea that Warrington and Widnes are different localities and need different RE is complete nonsense. Locality needs to be redefined, like it is in history and in other subjects, at the level of the classroom or the family or even the individual. And I would hope any future national curriculum includes local study, but decided at that very small locality level, not at something the size of Kent.
Thank you, Paul. You'll be pleased to know I'm running a reading group on that very article tomorrow, and there are some people who are no doubt nodding along because I hope they've read your article because it's tomorrow. Thanks, Paul. Anyone else want to add anything to what Paul had to say there about the local? Kathryn and Katie.
Yeah, very, very quickly, because I think it'd be good to hear from Katie from a classroom point of view as well on this one. Just to say, we're really, in our submission, we made a really strong case for the importance of the local as well, very much along the lines that Paul was just describing. There are a number of groups for history and geography in particular, for example, that do work really closely with teachers at local level. And I think it's really important to hear voices from those that are in the local community. And there's a couple of people on the call, I think, who've actually had funding from Culham St Gabriel to actually work with people in their locality, creating resources, films, that kind of type thing, which can be used in the classroom. So absolutely, the local's really important as part of any religious education curriculum.
Katie.
So I think two things really. One is that local kind of offer might not be about laying out what content needs to be taught. I think, Kathryn, you kind of from what you were saying, we're thinking along the same lines here. But I think it's about lived experience. So there's nothing more powerful than when you're teaching, especially in primary school with young children, for them to meet real livers of those religious and non-religious worldviews. And that brings local context into your classroom as well. So what is it like in Plymouth or Devon, where I live, to live out that worldview? Who are the people you come into contact with? Where do you go to worship if you're not worshipping at home or somewhere else? How far do you have to travel? What's it like to be a liver of that worldview? And I think that local context is vitally important, because those are the people that the children are going to come into community and meet. But also the second thing is that local could be national too. So just because our children live in Devon, the experience of being a Muslim, for example, in Devon would be very different to be a Muslim, the experience of being a Muslim in London or further up north, as we like to say down here. And I think that's really important for children to understand, so that local within their area, but also local within the UK as well, and what that looks like in different areas is also important.
Thank you, Katie. And she was quietly referencing some work she did on freedom of religion or belief there, where she was looking at the lack of places of worship, mandirs, for Hindu people in Devon. And I know Rachel Bookby, who I think might be here on the chat, did some local work as well on Sikh people not being able to wear turbans when they were on the bus. When they were driving the bus, to be right, when they were actual bus drivers. Right, I'm choosing the question that the panel are going to be really not pleased that I've chosen. Ruth Marks, well done for asking this one. So Ruth has asked the question, if RE goes into the national curriculum, do you think it is right that the right to withdraw should go? Is her first question, and because she likes to ask two difficult questions in one, she would like to ask, should it stay as a statutory subject in Key Stage 4 and 5? Now, no one wants to answer that question, but who can? Paul, thank you.
Yeah, I love a tricky question, but I don't think it's that difficult for me. If, and from what we understand from human rights, European law, if RE is delivered in a critical, pluralistic and open way, I've probably got those words wrong, then there doesn't need to be a right from withdrawal. The difficulty is mandating that. So I don't think it's actually a curriculum question. It's a plurality and criticality and openness question. So yeah, it could go for me. Very happy with that.
Anyone else want to add something to that?
I'll add something, Fiona, if you like. Agree with Paul. I think it quite seriously depends on which schools a national curriculum applies to. If it applies to all schools, then and that is the only RE that all schools are following, then absolutely agree with Paul. And there's been some interesting comments about Wales. I know there's different perspectives on how that's working out in Wales as well, so just be aware of that. In some ways, so that's my view. However, in practical terms, it might just be easier just to leave it as it is. There's, in a sense, it might be easier just to leave it as well. So I think if it applies to all, if it's going to apply, subjective, critical, and pluralistic applies to all types of school, and there's no other RE going on, then fine. If that's not the case, there could be a reason to keep the right to withdraw. If, for example, schools with a religious character were following a different kind of curriculum, there could be a case for keeping the right to withdraw in some circumstances. So I think there's a bit of a yes, and I kind of a bit torn on this one. I just wanted to sort of be honest, really, and just I'm quite torn on this one, because I think in an ideal bit, going back to your ideal world, Paul, an ideal world, yes, we would remove it, but it might be a bit more tricky than that, and it could be easier to keep it. I don't know.
Thanks, Kathryn. Right, we have time to answer one question very quickly, and I've chosen another. Oh, go on, Ben.
Sorry, just to pick up on the statutory at Key Stage 4 and 5 then, because the others talked about the right withdrawal. This is tricky for me. I mean, I love teaching. I teach GCSE to all our students. We're full cohort entry here, and that's really valuable to us. Statutory at Key Stage 5, I think that's probably quite difficult to kind of justify statutory at Key Stage 5, but then I'm not sure then, if you're questioning that, why Key Stage 4 is any particular different. And you know, it's not the case for in the national curriculum, most other subjects become option subjects, and that, you know, I've seen in the chat, it does link into a whole question about GCSEs generally. I mean, do we need to be doing GCSEs in all subjects? I'm undecided on that. Maybe a world where they do a GCSE in maths and English, and then everything else is some other kind of certificated learning of some, you know, that I can see that potentially working. So I'm not convinced there is a really good argument for statutory RE at Key Stage 4 and at Key Stage 5. On a national curriculum issue, though, if we had a good national curriculum, that maybe means that, you know, if we can make sure that we get good primary RE everywhere, and that then pushes secondary teachers to have to do even better at Key Stage 3, we may be able to sort of get to maybe get to where we want to in RE by the age of 14 for all students, and then give those an option to continue if they wish.
And I'd be even more radical and say we don't even need English and maths at Key Stage 4. If we get a proper curriculum that makes everybody numerate and literate by the age of 14, which they should be, everything's up for grabs after that.
Well, here was me thinking I was going to end with a controversial question. You've managed to make me not be able to ask that one, which is marvellous. Sorry, Charlotte, it was going to be yours. But wow, I think we should stop them before they abolish every exam known to man and woman. Really interesting. And I think it's really interesting how having this curriculum and assessment review is making us think about our positions and making us think about things that we thought we would never change our opinions on. I think what I've heard from today's session is that there will be no perfect solution. Whether as a subject we are placed within the national curriculum, or whether it's some other agreement that is made, nothing will be perfect. If we're in, yes, we will lose some freedoms, but we might gain lots. If we are outside, maybe there can be a better position than the position that we are in. None of them will be perfect. The ideal world that Paul mentioned is not one we've found quite yet. In a moment, I'm going to thank our speakers. But of course, what I now need to do is to do the quiz, do the poll again. Now, I foolishly didn't write down the percentages, but let's see where we get to now. I'm going to ask you the same question. What do you think now? Should RE be included in any new national curriculum? I think it was 70-something% last time, but some
75.
people then it was 75. Thank you, Paul. Some different people have arrived since then, so you know this is no good for anybody's research. I'm terribly sorry. Well, I've got some answers, and it feels like we have. Oh, some people still haven't voted. Come on, come on. There's 9 of you. It's your own time you're wasting. Come on, get off that fence, vote somewhere. They're not going to, are they? No matter how much I attempt to bully them into it. Well, we've had almost everybody voting, only 8 that didn't. And well, at least it's not 52-48. I'm going to end that poll. I'm going to share the results. And of course, the truth is it hasn't moved much. I'm terribly sorry. Very persuasive, you four. But what we hope in the session that we have just had and the really meaningful chat that's been going on in the chat, that we have helped you to think about your own position. What do you think about this? And we'll be really interested to hear your opinions. If you've got a blog within you that you want to write for us, or if you want to comment underneath any of our posts, we're on Blue Sky, Instagram, LinkedIn, Twitter, probably some more.
Facebook, is that, if you said Facebook?
No, I didn't say, I knew there was another one. Facebook. So thank you to Paul, to Ben, to Katie, and to Kathryn for everything that we have heard from you today. And I hope this has helped you think a little more about this idea. And we will await to hear what the interim report from the Curriculum and Assessment Review that is promised in spring. I'm not sure what the definition of spring is, but it's definitely still, it's got up till April, hasn't it? Spring, but it's still winter now. So we're hoping to hear from something now, and then there will be a final report later in the year. Thank you for your time and have a lovely evening, everybody.